Hi guys, Dr. Houlihan here. I've got a few videos on my channel talking about niche pathologies of the foot and how to address them, but today I want to give you my overall top 5 tips for creating and maintaining healthy feet. Tip number 1 is buying shoes that are shaped like a human foot. And no, I do not mean triple E, quadruple E, 5 E's, however many E's you want to put on the width. That width is not created in the part that needs to be widest. When you're talking about extra width shoes, it usually comes at the metatarsal heads, but that's not actually the widest part of your foot. The widest part of your foot is your toes at the end of the shoe. Other factors like having thin, flat, and flexible shoes are also beneficial, but at the very least, every single human being on earth should have a pair of shoes on their feet that are shaped like a human foot. It would be completely nonsensical to wear anything other than a shoe that's shaped like a human foot. Throughout centuries, fashion has done really weird things like elevating the heel, making these long pointy toes, but that's not actually good for feet. If you're going to the Met Gala, sure, wear some high heels with a pointy toe. Every other day of the year, wear something that's shaped like an actual foot. I could spend an hour on this section alone, but just understand there is a myriad of health problems that can be avoided and alleviated just by having shoes that are shaped like a foot. Tip number 2 is exercise barefoot. It's definitely a bonus if you do foot-specific exercises, but even if you're not doing foot-specific exercises, just exercising with your bare feet turns everything you do into a foot exercise. When you're exercising in shoes, your feet are locked inside these tiny cramped little boxes. You can't move the joints in your feet, you can't use the muscles in your feet, you're just inhibited from using this whole structure at the bottom of your leg. So you take your shoes off, you unlock a whole world of possibilities. It doesn't matter if it's squats, bent over rows, lunges, overhead press, bicep curls. Anything that you're doing on your feet without your shoes on is a foot exercise. Tip number 3, use toe spacers. The vast majority of us have grown up wearing tight, pointy shoes that have completely deformed the way that our feet are supposed to look. Anytime I have a client who grew up barefoot, like in the country or something, I can spot them from a mile away. Their feet just look markedly healthier. The toes are not all cramped together. The feet are not flat. They don't have bunions. They don't have hammer toes. They don't have weird calluses. They just have natural looking feet, which is how everyone's feet will develop if they're not inside shoes. So if you're like me and you spent the first 25 years of your life wearing tight pointy shoes, use some toe spacers to help restore the natural shape of your foot. Toe spacers have a ton of benefits, including improved circulation to your feet, improved strength in your feet, improved alignment and mobility of your feet. The list goes on. Improvements in those areas precipitate down to reduced symptoms for all sorts of common foot pathologies. So if you're not already, just spend some time barefoot and get yourself some toe spacers. Tip number 4 is training the mobility of your feet. This goes back to spending the first 25 years of my life and however old you are years of your life in tight, cramped little shoes. If you put your whole arm in a cast for 25 years, the mobility in every joint of your arm would be severely restricted. The same is true if you're used to wearing rigid, restrictive footwear. You've got about 33 joints in your foot. They would not be there if they were not meant to move, and when they're inside a tight, restrictive, rigid shoe, they cannot move. Therefore, spending time barefoot and training the mobility of the joints and the tendons and the ligaments and the muscles in your foot can help restore them to their natural state. This could be as simple as literally just grabbing your foot and moving your toes around with your hands. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, just get your feet moving. Tip number 5, this is my secret weapon, I'm always armed with it. Spend some time standing or walking on a balance beam. The balance beam accomplishes all of the aforementioned goals that you want to achieve for your feet. To shape your foot around the beam, the joints in your foot have to move. It works on the mobility of your feet. It is difficult to stay atop the balance beam, so the muscles in your feet have to contract in order to stay balanced. It can help reduce the valgus position of a bunion. And depending on where your foot is at on the beam, you can preference towards the medial longitudinal arch of your foot, the lateral longitudinal arch of your foot, and just by the shape of the beam, also the transverse arch of your foot. It's also pretty relaxing. Just put some calm music on, walk across your beam a little bit, you're going to be having a good time. Now obviously these tips do not substitute for actual medical advice, so if you have some weird, crazy pathologies going on with your foot, be seen in person before making any drastic changes to your lifestyle or your footwear. And make sure you're seen by someone who knows what they're talking about. Not some dinosaur who's going to tell you to get the lumpiest Skechers you can find and go to the orthopedic store and get some inserts. I can tell you with certainty that that has solved a grand total of 0 foot problems. And pain is not a problem. Pain is the result of a problem. So hopefully these tips are helpful for you guys. If you're already doing stuff like this, great. If you need advice on how to get started or resources or where you can find some of these materials, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help. And for what it's worth, I made this thing myself for like 30 bucks at Home Depot. Drop any questions or comments below. I'm happy to hear from you guys, and I'll have more coming soon.